All right, thank you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, who is here to talk about street response, a pilot program that they're launching in Lents specifically. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I want to compliment Lents Neighborhood Association. I never do community meetings that don't have childcare, that don't have food, that doesn't make sure that we're removing barriers for people's full participation. And it's wonderful to see that model out in the neighborhood where people understand that people are coming from work or school and life, and if you want them to show up, you got to actually feed them and allow them to be able to bring their youngins with them. So thank you for that. You are modeling good behavior that we want to see spread all over the city of Portland. And so I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to invite Cara Sands from Street Roots, and I'm going to invite Tremaine from Portland Fire and Rescue to come up and join me so that we can have a conversation. Because I don't like talking the whole time. Believe it or not, as a public servant, I really don't like talking at people the whole time. So I'm going to tell you what the vision is. I'm going to tell you why Lents is the lucky neighborhood who's getting this project. And I'm going to tell you how you can be a part of making sure that this project is successful. So I ran for office under this premise that people who are suffering from a mental health issue shouldn't die because somebody calls 911 for help. Yeah. I ran under the assumption that we needed to really rethink how we did first responders, and quite frankly, who we sent as first responders out in the community. Now, my office, because, you know, my trade is I'm a community organizer, so when I'm thinking about public policy, I'm thinking about it from the position of who needs it most, and how do I make sure that I'm centering their voices in the deliberation and the development of that policy. So when I got to City Hall and I went and talked to Fire and Rescue and said, hey, I got this great idea. They told me that I was a little crazy and I should rethink my original premise. Because my original premise was, let's just send firefighters, right? They don't carry weapons, and normally when people see them coming, people see help is on its way. But once I got into City Hall and got on the other side of the desk, what I realized is we really did need to be more thoughtful. And we had some models that were already working. For example, Tremaine has been working in this project called CHECK. And when Tremaine comes up here, he can tell you what the acronym stands for. But basically, it is people who call 911 a lot, right? What we call frequent users of 911 service. And what they did long before I got here was start to do some analysis saying, well, you know, there are people that are calling 911 regularly, and they really don't need 911. But what they need is a caring person to show up. What they need is somebody to help them navigate systems in our community. What they need is a caring ear. And so the CHECK program was created to actually take those 100 top callers to 911 and really do one-on-one visits, which is what Tremaine did. Went to their homes when they weren't calling 911, sat down and talked to them. And here's what we found. What we found were that there were many seniors who were isolated, didn't have family in the community, and quite frankly, there was a lot of pride about actually calling and asking for help. But if you call a firefighter, they're just going to show up and they're going to smile and they're going to talk to you and they're just going to hang out with you until they're sure you're okay. So here's what Portland Street Response would do. The pilot, so when we developed the pilot, we started by going out and interviewing houseless people on the street. And here's the questions that we asked them. What do you need from first responders? When somebody shows up because 911's been called, what do you need? And they gave us a list of what they need. We talked to the business community. We did a survey. What do you need? Realizing that we're in a housing crisis in the city of Portland, realizing that we will not be able to build fast enough for all the people who need housing in our community. What do you need? Then we went and talked to service providers So what we did was really take our time and have lots of community conversations and dialogues and surveys and did the analysis based on that information. What Portland Street Response will do will be to have a EMT, Tremaine, and it will have another individual. And the other individual we're still trying to work out. Could be a mental health professional, could be a peer supporter, could be a nurse, it could be a social worker. The second person will be someone else who can help provide support to the individuals that are in crisis on our street. Why are people on our street? People are living on our streets because it is too expensive to live in a city of Portland. When we talk about housing and housing affordability, I think that I know the city of Portland has truly missed the ball because the median income in the Portland metro area today is $81,500 for a family of 4. Now, most people I know don't make that kind of money, right? So if you're working 2.5 or 3 minimum wage jobs, there's almost nowhere in the city of Portland you can live. So when we talk about building affordable housing, but yet we start at 80% of MFI, we're saying that you have to have $72,000 in order to have the privilege of applying for affordable housing, right? That is not affordable housing. And that is the challenge. The challenge is to get people to be very specific about what they mean when they say affordable housing. So I've kind of turned that on its head by saying housing people can afford to live in. Because I can't tell you what's affordable for you, you can't tell me what's affordable for me. So the Portland Street Response, every community we went in wanted Portland Street Response to be piloted in their community. Because just like us at City Hall, you know we've got a problem on our street and it's severe and we have not been able to wrap our arms around it. So let me tell you first what Portland Street Response will not do. Portland Street Response will not provide mental health treatment. Portland Street Response will not provide housing for people who need it. Portland Street Response will not intervene in cases where there is a violent act taking place. What Portland Street Response will do is bring water, maybe hot soup, supplies to people who are in crisis on our street. And it's basically a triage operation, quite frankly, because that's what we're doing. We're taking care of people where they are, right? We can't say to them, okay, we can get you in this mental health bed, because the reality is we need Salem and the federal government to give us more mental health dollars. That's what we need. We need the mental health drop-in clinic downtown to be renovated and open so that we have real mental health beds downtown Portland for people who need them. So Portland Street Response, the plan is to have this pilot roll out in the spring. We're still working with our labor partners to make sure that we're all on the same page. We're still trying to finalize who that second individual will be in that 2-person team. It will start 5 days a week from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. But what I love about this pilot is that Portland State University's housing cohort, houselessness cohort, is actually going to be evaluating this process every step of the way. And which means that we can change on a dime in order to make sure that we're best serving the people that we're trying to serve through this program. Again, we will need community help because, of course, one van can't be everywhere. And then I think the other thing that we need to start doing for our community is to remind people why you should or should not call 911. The biggest increase in 911 callers over the last few years have been for unwanted people. And that's shameful on us that we are calling 911 and we're trying to make it sound as dangerous as possible so that we can get a law enforcement response to come out and remove people who, but for being poor, but for being houseless, would not be on the street at all. And so we need to retrain our community that 911 really is a number for emergencies only. That's something we will have to do together. Quite frankly, I think the community has been very, very supportive of this pilot, but I also want to balance the excitement about a new model, because we haven't changed how we do 911 since the late 1800s. And it's really kind of time for us to rethink our first responder system, especially when we realize that it doesn't always work as intended. So I will stop there. I would invite Kyra to come up, and I'll invite Tremaine to come up. And Kyra is the publisher and director of Street Roots. Street Roots vendors were key in helping us connect with houseless people so that we could have real conversations and really be able to engage people in this activity. Tremaine has been vital in helping us really think through how we can put a system in place that actually follow the model of I am here to help figure out what I can do for you in this moment. And so thank you both for being here tonight. I know how long both of your days always are as well. And so we are your team, and we're here to answer questions for you. I see a gentleman in the back. Is there a mic? They got this rule about a mic. Okay, there's a mic. There's a gentleman back there with the hat on that because I don't have my glasses on, I can't see what it says.
When you put your hands up, please keep them up too so that we can make sure that we see you.
If I don't get everybody's hanging in on it.
Maybe not like the whole time.
All right, greetings. I'm William X. Michi. We've spoke before. Me and my mother is Julie Metcalf Kinney. We are in a situation where it is in a situation of the brink of homelessness. And so my question is, how do we prevent people from getting to this place of homelessness? I hear you offering the service of street response, but there's no mechanisms in place to prevent homelessness. So we're trying to fix problems that we need to find mechanisms to prevent homelessness.
Well, with all due respect, there are some mechanisms in place, but clearly not enough money to help all the people who are in need. And so part of the Portland Housing Bond that voters passed a couple of years ago does eviction mitigation, right? And so I'm calling the Joint Office of Housing Services, asking them what agency to connect to so that they can help. Sometimes what they do, I'm on the Board of Human Solutions, so that's, we provide affordable housing for very low income families in East Portland. And what we do many times is pay an electricity bill, right? Or pay the rent for a month, right? Or get a car fixed, right? I mean, we used to have safety nets in this country, so if one bad thing happened, it didn't put people out on the street. That's gone. We have some resources, but you have to, actually, here's a great number to call. What is the number at the city? Is it 211? 211 is the city information line, right? That actually has a list of resources available. So you can call that number. There's a live body that answers it Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I would start there. I'm sorry, you need that mic so that not just me, but everybody else can hear you.
Yes, this situation is quite different. This is in regards to keeping home ownership. We are the last home on Mississippi Street, and so the resources lines have not been effective. There hasn't been any legal services. In fact, the judicial system itself has been perpetuating this problem of kicking the people out of their homes with unlawful judicial processes.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't get into judicial processes, but what I'd be happy to do is, Matt, put your hand up. Give Matt your business card. I'll have someone in my office follow up. But tonight we're really focused on the Portland street response. I know that we have a lot of issues in the city of Portland, and we could be here until midnight just talking about a couple of them. But but I want to stay focused on our conversation tonight. But we will definitely reach out. We will follow up with you.
If you have your hand raised, I'm gonna go from the back up to the front, and I'm counting everybody, so just be patient. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Lucas, and I was curious about with this Portland Street Response program, how I see that there's also Cheers and Project Respond on here in the Multnomah County Crisis Line. And I'm curious, after one, how long is the pilot project going to last? Will it be expanded within that process during the pilot project? And then what will the coverage look like to be able to have an appropriate response? Just because I believe with some of the other projects, I might be quoting it incorrectly, but like Cheers, I think there's one or two vans that are covering the whole county. So
I can answer all of those questions in one foul swoop. So Cheers, Central City Concern used to run the Cheers van. Central City Concern came to the city a couple of months ago and said, we've been doing this for 30 years, and we want you to know we're not going to do this anymore. Because what we've learned in 30 years is we need more humane ways for people to detox rather than putting them in this tiny cell and letting them just like sleep it off or go through whatever they go through to get back to normal, right? So Portland Police Bureau is now trying to reimagine what resource would replace that. Quite frankly, I think Portland Police should not be the one trying to figure that out. We should have medical people trying to figure that out because it is a medical issue when people are detoxing, whether it's alcohol or drugs. So that's one. Two, the pilot is starting with just one van. It is my hope that midway through the pilot, which will last for 1 full year, midway through the pilot, if resources are available, I'd like to add an additional pilot in another part of town, right? The reason why Lents was such an ideal place to launch this is because of the small geographic area and the interconnectedness with the fire management area here, right? So it just seemed like, and it was a place with limited social service supports. So all those factors came into play as to why Lents would be the ideal. So did I get them all? There was a third one, yeah. Oh yeah, Project Response. So Project Response only shows up if the police show up with them, right? Which is a different model than the model of the Portland Street Response. The Portland Street Response absolutely will not have a law enforcement connection. It may be possible that as it rolls out, police may call Portland Street Response and say, you know, we need your help. We need you to go to this address, right? Or we need you to go to this corner. But we will have no relationship. That's the difference with Project Response. That's the big difference. And it makes a difference, right? Because for some people, just the uniform and the weapons are enough to freak them out. And if
I could add to that, one of the big differences, because Project Respond was one of the programs they were looking at to make sure we weren't duplicating services. And that's also one of the reasons we haven't fully selected that second partner. One of the things that Project Respond does are the really high acuity level calls. And because they're tied up with those higher level calls, those lower level calls are the ones that are getting missed. And then sometimes will be ramped up into unfortunate events. So really we're looking at the subacute, in terms of like less severe mental health crises that Project Respond may not get to because of the higher level, and that's really the big distinction between the two.
I'm going to come back up this way. You were waiting.
Hi. I do have a question, but before I ask my question, I'd just like to say, as a single female who is disabled and has PTSD, I actually kind of resent your comment about people calling 911 for someone coming onto your property, because I've had people high on drugs and mentally ill come onto my property and do, you know, go to the bathroom or dump needles or whatever, and I pay taxes and I have the right to call 911 if I feel threatened. And I resent being told that that's,
Ma'am, I didn't say if someone came on your property that it was inappropriate to call 911. What I said is that if someone is putting up a tent, or if you're uncomfortable with what someone looks like, that is not an appropriate reason to call 911.
Well, you said uncomfortable with someone going on the property. I'm not going to argue, I'm just telling you how I feel. So my thing about the street response is my question is, I'm not necessarily opposed to the program. I hope you know that in the past couple of years we've had a lot of homicides and drive-by shootings in Lents, and I totally want the police to be freed up to do their job protecting us and investigating those things. My concern is that we have such a lack of places to take people suffering mental illness, and such a lack of, I know they're shutting down whatever it's called, the detox thing that was made for alcohol, and everyone's on meth now, and the hospitals are overloaded with people who are in mental health crisis or in drug crisis. So I'm just concerned that we're going to be spending money inappropriately when we should be really concentrating on funding like a long-term solution. I don't want to be spending money on Band-Aids when we should literally be spending money on a hospital. So it's the appropriate, is this the appropriate appropriation of funds? And how are you going to measure the success of this program?
Good evening, I'm Kaya from Street Roots, and one of the reasons why we got involved is we saw how just messed up our first responder system is. I think Commissioner Hardesty was talking about, the frequency of phone calls, I think is what you're addressing. And every 15 minutes, an unwanted person phone call would go into 911, so-called unwanted person. Every 4 minutes, a phone call would go to the police for a non-criminal matter. So in terms of resources being misspent, we were seeing that happen, and actually there'd be a less expensive way to respond than sending police out for matters that actually aren't even within a police officer's purview. Just like also sending out fire and ambulance to take someone off to a hospital or to jail when actually they can be treated on the spot and taken care of in that way. So I just wanted to emphasize it's actually a cost-saving perspective. It's based on actually Eugene Cahoots. Cahoots actually saves Eugene millions of dollars. So just to kind of put that, if we think a little differently, like Commissioner Hardesty said, gosh, we haven't changed our first responder system since the 1800s. We didn't have the right first responders for a lot of our contemporary situations. So first we just need to fix that, and it's going to be a lot more cost effective to do so.
And I am remiss in not introducing Bob Cossey, who is the 911 director. He's the director of the Bureau of Emergency Communication. And so I've been talking about him as if he wasn't here, and I feel bad about that. What I want to say also is today, if you call 911, if the operator doesn't know who to send, they will send police, fire, and AMR. Now, only one of those three have a financial incentive to show up. And the only question they ask is if you want to be transported, and that's AMR. And if you say no, they're off. Now you have fire and you have police. But if it's people who are just in distress, with no insurance, and really nowhere to go, is that really a good use of our first responders? We have a lot, the call volume continues to rise, and we have to be smarter about how we deploy those resources. I think we've done the public a disservice by believing that police will solve all social ills in our community, and that simply is not so. They are not equipped, they are not social workers, they are not mental health professionals, even though they've had some training, right? The reality is that if we send the right first responder to the right situation at the right time, the investment will be appropriate, and it won't be sending three folks who really aren't the right entities to show up.
So would you be, like at the end of the year, be publishing something that shows that financially this has been success. So how are you going to show that it's successful?
Well, yes, we will be evaluating, as I said, every step of the way. Portland State University's Houseless Collaborative has been partners with us from the beginning, so they will be monitoring our activity, and we will be changing our activity based on the information that we gather along the way. The reality is that this is an investment. I got the city council to put $500,000 aside to do this, right? But quite frankly, I think it's the right investment, and I'm going to make sure, as long as I'm in charge, I'm going to make sure that we are using these dollars wisely and that we're having an impact. I mean, today, if you think about how much money we waste by arresting people who, but for being houseless, would have never been arrested, then we send them through the court system, then they go to the jail, then they go back on the street, then they miss their court date, then they have a warrant for their arrest, and then we start the cycle all over again. But if we go back to the cause was poverty. The cause was not having access to resources, and we must do better because we're not going to have an unlimited pool of resources.
I see like a mini. My question, I have a few questions, but one of my questions is how exactly will this team be deployed? Like, how will it be connected to the current 911 system? That's one of my questions.
Okay, to start, that was one of, well, to kind of back up, when I started the CHOT program, which is the Community Healthcare Assessment Team, it was looking at those high utilizers of 911 and how do we connect them to services, again, with the response model, trying to create response reliability. When we're recognizing that we're going to the same address sometimes 4 to 6 times a day, and the cycle is just they get sent home because there's nothing wrong with them, they call 911 and we do that. Our job is really to engage with that person, figure out what the underlying cause was, and figure out what specialty person we needed to see and connect them to those services. Oftentimes it was just a primary care provider. Then the commissioner started running for office, and I remember waking up one morning and hearing her talk, and I thought, that sounds like my job. And it was very exciting. And now here we are. Wow. The story was put out by Street Roots, and now the question is, why aren't we doing this all over the city? We are already in the position because we're already connected through dispatch. We're already going on these calls. The apparatus we're sending, 4 firefighters and a fire suppression vehicle, it's not the right tool for a mental health crisis, not the right tool for someone who's just out on the street surviving. So could we take those services, specialize it, and then go in place to leave the fire department and the police officers in the right spot? Dispatch comes in, taps us out on that unwanted call or unwanted person call, or any other types of calls that we're going through. And I believe if you have that copy, it shows the scenarios that will be sent out on. It's all going to come through dispatch.
Okay, so let me give you a scenario that we see frequently here in Lents. There is a person in the throes of mental illness or drug illness, wandering the streets, screaming, or what have you, and you call 911 for a wellness check and say, I would do that. They would send you, so you would be connected to dispatch and then you would be sent to that.
Yes.
Okay. So my secondary question is, how are the times of day decided? Because anecdotally from my neighbors and myself, a lot of the time that we see people in severe mental health or drug crisis is at night or very early in the morning. So how is it decided that the times of day would be Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.? It doesn't seem like that would capture the need.
I thought you would have been right until I looked at the data. And once we looked at the data and analyzed the data, what we realized is that we will be covering the bulk of the time those calls come in. Now, after we launch, we may find out maybe we really ought to work Tuesday through Saturday, right? Because maybe Saturday will have more traffic than we know right now. But based on the 911 call data, we believe that this is the right area, the right time of day, especially for the calls that come into Lents.
That's fascinating. My third question is, what are the exact parameters that constitute program success before a citywide rollout will happen?
Oh, you are good. What we have is very specific measurable outcomes, right? Is it on the document that we passed that? I can't remember. Put my glasses on, thank you. And so here are going to be the measurable outcomes. You have a document in front of you that says Portland Street Response Pilot. It's a one-pager front and back that fabulous Matt McNally passed out while you weren't looking. Here's how we're going to measure success. We're going to reduce the number of non-warrant arrests that result on a 911 response, reduce the number of individuals transported to the emergency department for low acuity medical-related issues that could instead be addressed in a pre-hospital care setting. And third, reduce the number of behavioral health and lower acuity medical calls traditionally responded to by fire and police. And then as far as rolling it out, the success will determine the speed, the resources available will determine how the process works, right? We want to be very intentional and not over-promise. So I figured if I under-promise you and over-perform, you will like me much better. But the reality is that this is a learning as you go process, right? And what I love is that we will make mistakes, but we will be able to correct those mistakes on the ground at the same time that we discover them and then learn from what we replace it with, right? We may end up changing out the second person because we find out, no, we really do need a social worker because they've got all these connections into other kind of services, right? We may decide, no, having a mental health professional on every call is vital because we are overwhelmed with people who are experiencing mental health crisis, right? Let me just say that anyone who is forced to live on the street in Oregon is in a mental health crisis. You cannot be on the street and not suffer from a mental health crisis. So we have to be mindful that it is not, nobody's having a good time living on the street in Portland. So that's a big, important part of this. Did you have anything else on that list? Yeah, we got through her list.
Okay, well, really quickly before we move on to the next question, I just want to say a couple of things. So, in order to make room for more voices and get to more questions, if you could all please limit your questions to one per person, your most burning one. And then remember, there are these pieces of paper, there's some on your table, or if they've already been used, there's some by the door that you can use to write any other follow-up questions that you might have for any of the speakers tonight. And the red box is here now. I don't know why, but it's here. And it looks like there's a bunch in here. So, and then the second thing is, if you've already spoken tonight, we might not call on you while we still try to get through the people who haven't yet spoken. So just note that that's why if you have your hand up and we haven't called on you, that's why. Thank you.
Okay, so my question is, you said that the response is about kind of immediate basics. In what way can you be there right there in an immediate way, help people to move beyond meeting with immediate basics? In other words, will you be, for example, in the future, a conduit for people to go to the Hope Center where it's up and running?
To what center?
The Hope Center, the former
Wapato has nothing to do with my plan, so I don't know what's happening. I don't know who's got it down. Has nothing to do with my plan. I don't anticipate us being engaged with Wapato at all.
Well, it's not going to be Wapato. It's called the Hope Center.
Whatever you call it, it's still the same place, and I don't see. No, my project has nothing to do with that project.
Because it's going to be a place
That's what I keep hearing. I've been hearing that for a while, and I hope that the rich private sources actually are able to pull that off. But I'm not going to divert public money and from actually taking care of people who are in need today and doing what we need to do to make sure that they're at least as comfortable as they can be.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is move through a system that can help them to get beyond that.
Well, that's what Portland Street Response is all about. It's about providing a compassionate, empathetic ear, identifying resources, because the people who will be working with Portland Street Response will be trained in de-escalation. They will be trained in how to engage people who may be suffering from mental health issues. They will also have access to any resources that any first responder would have. So they will have the same kind of communication device. So if there's a bed open that somebody needs, they will be able to access that. But again, it is not our goal to gather people up and take them someplace. It is our goal to try to keep people comfortable where they are and to make sure that we are minimizing the danger to the community while we are putting permanent solutions in place. So permanent solutions like housing with social services attached to the housing, like making sure that the state provides more mental health support, alcohol and drug treatment support, making sure that when we say we're building affordable housing, that we really are focused at the 30% to zero income levels, so that we really are getting the people most vulnerable into housing as quickly as possible. Other questions?
I just want to say we're getting pretty close on time. We have a lot of questions, which is amazing. I don't think we're going to get to everybody. I've been counting, and we're about 5 people ahead. So.
Well, I'm willing to stay as long as you're willing to stay, so.
Oh, mine wasn't a question. I was just, a lot of you folks have heard of assertive community treatment team. The assertive community treatment team? No. You've heard of that, right? No. Okay. So this is like, to me, that's how I see it. Like you mentioned, Joanne, de-escalations. It's not long-term for sure, but it's also not a psychiatrist sitting at the desk with the nurse practitioner scurrying around, the RNs, the peer support, the education specialist, whatever. And so you think money? That's a lot of money. And there's probably good statistics for, those kind of things out in the field. So I did that like 10, 15 years ago, and that was a lot of work and a lot of people then. So I was born in Portland, so we have the same problems we've always had. Yes. It's just bigger.
It's just exacerbated, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. No doubt about it.
First, I just want to say, this sounds awesome. This is just scratching me right there, right itch. It really does feel like we still have like an industrial age response to emergencies and moving into the information age, we need a new thing. I want to give you I'll tell 2 really abridged quick stories, and I want to hear, in light of those stories, how you think, 1, street response would respond, specifically the other person, and 2, what volunteers can do to tune how that response might go. And by the way, I also want to say, I'm not sure it's true. The one thing that I heard that I'm not sure is true is I think there are some people, and I know I was one for a long time, who live on the street and don't dislike it. Portland is a place where I think not everyone, some people just don't like the lifestyle of living in a house. But anyway, okay, really quick, super rich stories. 1, I hear yelling, swearing, ranting outside, and I go outside, and there are neighbors following this woman. They say, she's obviously having some kind of issue. They've already called the police. I think to myself, this is not, I'd rather her not come to the police. So I run, literally, and catch up to her. She is so messed up, she doesn't even know her own name, right? And I thought it was LSD at first, and I was like, I can probably talk this person through this, but it wasn't. what she needed was someone not for 10 or 20 minutes, but for a long time. And she didn't need an expert in any particular field. She just needed someone that had been really messed up before, which I assume at some point most adults have been. And so I wonder what might be the role of the other person in that scenario. Okay, story number 2, really quick. Last night, I was walking down Foster in the rain. A woman comes up to me and asks, "Do you know of any place that's open until 6:30?" And she is totally distraught, totally, just messed up, and says that she's been kicked out of the shelter because she made a mistake thinking she saw so many drugs and alcohol there, and she said that she didn't really feel that messed up and she just wanted a drink. And so she got herself 2 airplane bottle sized, liquor and made herself a little mixed drink, got kicked out of the shelter, and now she was lucid, totally cool, but just was urgently needing someplace to go. And she ended up sleeping on my couch until 6:30, which didn't make me super comfortable, but I won't let you know. So I just wonder, what will street response do, and 2, what can we do to tune how those responses might be in situations like this?
First, let me just say thank you for letting that woman sleep on your couch. That was not something that a lot of people would do, so thank you for that. The second thing I will say, for the first case with the person that was talking to themselves and frantic, Portland Street Response will probably do just what you did. If what they needed was somebody to walk with them, they would just walk with them and just keep talking in a very calming tone of voice until they were calmed down. The great thing about Portland Street Response is, unlike the 911 responders that are police and fire and AMR, Portland Street Response won't have to check back in right away, right? So they don't have to, like with fire, it's like their bell is going off all the time, so they can't sit for hours and sit and talk to that person, right? But by golly, Portland Street Response could sit until they had another call that they needed to go to. And maybe they would develop a protocol about, well, this person still may not need to be, probably not safe to leave them by themselves. And so then they would have to figure out, well, so what do we do? Do we go on this next call and then come back? They will have to work that out. And that's quite frankly why we're doing a pilot. Because, right, it's like we just don't know kind of what we're going to experience. Would you agree with that? Yeah. Right? So we just don't know what we don't know yet. But we're open to all of that. Now, in the case of the woman, I mean, what that says is, even the temporary shelters that we have, lots of it has rules. So for example, if you have a pet, you can't bring your pet into most shelters. If you have a partner, if you have a same-sex partner, you may have limits on whether or not that could happen in a shelter, depending upon the rules of that particular shelter, right? And so when people say, well, why don't they just go to a shelter? If all your life worldly possessions are the shopping cart, you're not going to want to leave that shopping cart to go and see if it's possible for you to get a mat for that night, right? So this is the reality that we have community members dealing with day in and day out. And so it's not that people are saying, I don't want help, but they're waiting, right? I mean, I've had people say to me, well, I don't take a shower because if I take a shower, I have to leave my stuff. And if I go in the shower and come back, my stuff will be gone. I mean, how sad is that, right? I mean, but that's the reality that many people are living with every day on our street. Next question.
That's me. I wish you best luck with it. I think it's a great idea, and I really do hope it's a success.
Thank you.
What I will say, though, I think it's important that you get the opinion of all peoples. I think, clearly you've got the ear of people who experience homelessness, people who work with people who are homeless. But in order for it to be a success, you need buy-in from people who are residents as well.
Yes.
And so far I heard a lot of what you're saying coming from the angle of people who are suffering from homelessness, and not so much like from those of us that have to wake up at 3 in the morning because somebody broke into our house, or our garden more often is the case. You hear the door rattling, you get up, kids are crying, dogs are barking, and I'm hearing it just coming from the people who are mentally ill or who are suffering from some kind of a drug overdose at the time, and got a lot of meth is a problem here. So, do you have somebody whispering in your other ear?
Yes, yes. So just so you know, we did talk to business owners, we talked to homeowners, we surveyed every demographic in the city of Portland. We talked to faith institutions. I mean, we intentionally took the time to make sure that we were leaving no corner without input, right? The reason that I mentioned houseless people, and I was like really focused on that, because that is rare. Normally what happens is somebody sits in the office and develops a program that's supposed to help people who are houseless and never once have a conversation with the people who the program is supposed to help, right? So the reason I focused on that was because that is unique for a government entity to even contemplate. And so, yes, of course, I talked to the normal suspects, right? I talked to everybody else, but I wanted to center that community, because rarely do they get to help shape public policy.
You hear counter arguments too. I mean, I imagine it's very easy to hear from your colleagues. I know that our friendship with Street Roots has obviously worked close with you on this, and when you're developing a plan like this, I wonder, is there somebody else who's making counter arguments to the argument that may be made from our friends from Street Roots, just so it's from a different perspective?
So, Kristen, how many people were in that work group? It was 6 months. There was what, over 200 people? 50 people. Meeting monthly.
But is it people who've already got a self-interest involved in it, or is it a general public open to?
Again, it was across the board, so we intentionally made sure that we reached out to folks. We didn't wait for people to come to City Hall and tell us what they thought, even though a lot of people did, right? We didn't wait for that. We actually reached out and talked to and engaged people, and we will continue to do that throughout the life of the project, right? This is not the last time I will be at the Lents Neighborhood Association, because I need you, quite frankly, to help me make this program successful. And what is that going to look like? Is it going to look like your neighborhood association actually organizing a day where you go out with sandwiches and actually engage people who are houseless? Is it going to look like we go out one day and actually follow Portland Street Response to see what they're doing? Is it you talking to your faith institution about how they could host one day of actually, but for grace that goes on, right? And actually help us raise resources to support the work that we want to do? I mean, I don't know what it looks like yet, but I'm hopeful that, like-minded people, right? Like-minded people who believe that there's something wrong when we have anybody living on the street, right? In a society, in a community with so many resources. If we all believe that's wrong, then all of us can do something, right? And what's incredible about all of us doing something is all those little somethings add up to something big. I gotta tell you, when we surveyed houseless people, a smile sometimes makes somebody's day because of how invisible you feel when you don't have a house and you don't feel good about how you look and you know other people are looking down on you. Just somebody acknowledging that you exist, some days is what you need to get through that day. So all of us, regardless of what resources we have, can help with this, right? Because these are our neighbors, these are our community members. These are folks that, but for grace, would be us. All it takes is what? A job loss, a car breaking down, a sick parent, a sick kid, but for grace. One bad, but I mean, a one bad decision shouldn't destroy the rest of your life. We all deserve redemption, do we not?
Yeah.
All right, amen.
Yeah. Just one second, before we move on to the next question, I just want to say I heard the commissioners say that they are willing to stay a little longer, and that is amazing. Thank you. To get through more questions, but our time is up, and I'm not ending the meeting. I just wanted to note that to be respectful of everyone's time, and for those who might need to leave before they do, there was one thing that I wanted to bring up because I think it's such a privilege that we have Prosper Portland here at the same time as the commissioner. I feel like oftentimes when topics come up, sometimes bureaus can say, oh, it's this other bureau's responsibility or this one, but now we have both of them here, and I was going to see if we could involve both of them on a little conversation about, so I was in a Community Budget Advisory Committee meeting a week or so ago, and we were talking about the developments in Lents and the empty spaces in Lents, and what could we possibly put in there, and then another community member, so it's not someone from the Prosper Portland staff, said, well, I've heard about street response coming to Lents, and I know they might connect people to social services. So have you guys thought, in terms of filling those spaces, like you've considered businesses, but have you thought about amenities for the people of Lents have enough amenities? And also, do they have enough services? Is there a possibility for Prosper Portland to partner with Street Response and have any kind of center there for some of the services that they offer, just to kind of enhance the program or anything like that?
So I will say that Prosper Portland is the economic development arm of the city of Portland, which is in the mayor's portfolio. So even though I push Prosper Portland around a bit because, quite frankly, I live in East Portland as well. I also live in a food desert area where we've lost major grocery stores. And I continue to try to push Prosper Portland to be creative about how we bring fresh food into food deserts. And so I think that is wonderful. I'm sorry, what's your name one more time? Thea was wonderful. You guys put a lot of pressure on a brand new staff person. I would encourage you to invite Kimberly Brown to come, the director of Prosper Portland, because she is the appropriate person to come and tell you what the vision is. I was very impressed with Thea that she actually could explain TIF, because I was sitting there going, man, I'm still trying to figure out how the TIF dollars work. What we should be doing, and quite frankly, I would say this if Kimberly were here, if I was part of this neighborhood association, I would be writing a formal letter to Kimberly, and I would be saying that we have empty spaces, that our community demands that we have a grocery store. There's a model in North Portland where a New Columbia is, that is a community grocery store. The residents run the grocery store. There are discounts for residents who actually shop at the grocery store. In fact, they get credit so that at the end of the month, if their check is light, right? They have stored credits that actually get them through the hump to the end of the month. We have some models already that exist in the city of Portland. We just don't actually share it with other parts of the city, right? It took a long time for North Portland to create their community grocery store, but it's phenomenal. And the residents love it, especially because it provides employment opportunities. There's no reason why Prosper could not give you space in their new developments in Lent for you to develop your own community grocery store. But guess what? If you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the New Columbia grocery store. There's only one there. And the man who started it, it would be great for you to invite him because it was a community effort to make that grocery store happen. And they are so proud of that grocery store. It is pretty phenomenal. One of the other phenomenal things about that particular grocery store is they sell no tobacco or no alcohol because that was a community commitment.
Questions and comments.
So, Commissioner Hardesty and all of you, I think this is it sounds terrific. Every time I hear about cahoots in Eugene, I always think, why can they do that and we can't do it up here? So the fact that you're trying to adapt that model for this urban area, I think is really admirable. But the part of it that and I really wish you success, the part of it that I'm struggling with is, at the beginning you talked about the huge uptick in 911 calls about unwanted people, and sort of building on what this gentleman was saying, a lot of those calls, some of those calls are about the person who is walking down the street screaming, but some of those calls are about the person who is come up on your porch, or is defecating in your yard, or is put up a tent on your property, and that's an unwanted person. And that person isn't necessarily a mental health problem, they're an unwanted person problem in that situation. I'm not talking about people who find a place to camp on the sidewalk. I'm talking about people who come onto your property. That's an unwanted person that someone might call 911 about. I have that problem myself. I don't call 911 because I don't want to burden the 911 system, what I would call is the non-emergency line. But there they tell you there's not really anything we can do. I don't quite see how this program is going to reduce the number of calls about the unwanted person situation. So the connection between that cause and this effort doesn't seem clear to me.
Bob, you look like you want to step in.
I wasn't one of the scheduled speakers, so I was kind of standing off on the side. I'm Bob Causey, director of the 911 Bureau. And just so you know, how many of you realize that your 911 center is in your neighborhood? Yeah, very good. We're at Howland 205 near the Ed Benedict Park. And so can you, I kind of sidetracked myself by introducing myself, but can you repeat what
So he's wondering if how Portland Street response is going to reduce 911 calls for unwanted people.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so I don't think it will reduce calls initially. When you call 911, you need help, right? We might refer you to the non-emergency number, and you call that number, but guess who answers it? It's the same people who answer 911. All we're doing is taking you off of a dedicated line for life and death emergencies. Okay? So when you call the non-emergency number, you'd be placed into a queue, and you might have to wait a little bit longer until all of the call takers are off 911 calls and are able to answer those non-emergency calls. So I pulled some stats. I thought maybe you'd be curious as to the call volume that we get. And last year in 2019, we answered 527,939 911 calls. 500,000 911 calls. That's a lot of calls. How many of those were real life and death emergencies? 10 to 20% perhaps. Only because we get multiple calls for multiple things. Everyone has a cell phone these days, so if there's a traffic accident, Foster and 205, the phones literally light up like a Christmas tree. So we'll get dozens of calls reporting one event. Okay. But those are calls that we have to process. Those calls keep us very, very busy all the time. Now we also pulled some initial stats, and these are, when we look at the Lents community and the numbers of calls for service, we have 500,000 911 calls, okay? That translates to a much smaller number of calls for service. But in the Lents community last year, we had 24,814 total calls for service. So that would be police responses, fire, and medical responses. The number tied to houselessness, and we do a data search through our system looking for keywords. Some of those keywords could be homeless, transient, camper, campfire. We look for those keywords that all of you might give us when you're reporting some kind of event. And of the number of homeless-related calls for service, it's relatively small. It's about 6% of that 24,814 calls. So what does that mean? That means that of that 6%, in theory, Portland Street Response might be able to respond on those calls as a more appropriate response, rather than police, or fire, or medical. That doesn't mean they're going to take all of them, because some calls really do require a police response. Some also really do require a fire or a medical response. Does that make sense?
And I think what Bob didn't say is that sometimes if you don't know who to send, right, it's the fire and the police and the AMR. So it can add up.
Okay, Cahoots in Eugene, I believe they also transport. One question is, are you guys going to transport? And the other question is, you're going to be dealing with a lot of the non-emergency stuff, but you know, there's emergencies that happen all the time. And if someone sees a fire truck, like your vehicle, going by accident where they're doing CPR, someone might be upset watching the vehicle drive right on by.
That's a good point. So the Portland Street Response will have its own logo. They will not look like firefighters. They won't dress like firefighters. They will have a different kind of uniform that will be readily identifiable as someone that's not armed or you know, in those type of uniforms. So that's one. Number two, you talked about what was the second point that you made?
Transporting.
Transport. We will not be transporting people. So the big difference between Cahoots in Eugene and Portland's Street Response, in Eugene, the police actually are the 911 dispatchers, right? So the 911 operation is inside the police department. And the police are the ones who dispatch Cahoots to go out and provide services in the community, right? And they built that program up over the last 30 years, right? And so it is now a institution as it relates to the city of Eugene. With Cahoots, because we don't have 911 and the police connected, and we don't want to have 911 and the police connected, we need to develop additional protocols to make sure that we are in fact sending the right folks to that call. And the other thing about transport is the ambulance is negotiated by Multnomah County Board of Commissioners, right? So the ambulance contract is not something that we have any control over. It is my hope that when it's up for renewal again, that we will be able to have a seat at the table so that we're actually part of negotiating for services that actually are in our community. But even today, fire, you would be amazed sometimes at what fire gets called out to do. TriMet sees fire as their own wake-up service, so even though they have 3 security forces, they call fire when somebody is asleep at the end of the Max or bus line. And so they bring that big fire engine, 4 big firefighters, and they tap the person on the shoulder. Boom, boom, boom. Do you need medical? Nope. And off they go in their big truck, right back to the fire station. We have hospitals who think, if this person isn't my patient, I'll just call 911 and have them remove them from my property. I was at OHSU down at the waterfront and talking to the security guy who they are training to, if there's someone who says they need medical help, they have to call 911. And who shows up? It's our firefighters that show up, right? And I have to say, I'm amazed that they're calm, because if you, I said, if you spit, you would hit doctors in every direction, right? But they call 911 and demand fire come, and then fire, what they did was actually put the patient in a cab, because they knew that this was a low-income person who couldn't afford the $1,800 ambulance bill. They put him in a cab so that they could go up the hill to OHSU emergency room. I mean, So the waste that we already have built into our system is astronomical, right? So when people say, what is it going to cost? It costs more for us to do what we've been doing than it is to fundamentally change how we operate. And that's why this change is so key.
Add that on the advocacy side, I hope that you do advocate for transport. I think that that's a really important piece. So I look at it, all of you, I'm going to get a little bit lofty because as we were talking about this plan for the months and months and months, neighborhoods all over the city were clamoring to be able to be the pilot. And I think it's pretty exciting to be able to be in the neighborhood where you're all going to figure it out together, the way that Commissioner Hardesty said, where it's kind of up to everyone to help this succeed too. And I want to point out that I think a lot of neighborhoods would love to have Tremaine in their neighborhood. When you're mentioning Cahoots, Tremaine trained with Whitebird that runs Cahoots. So he's not only a part of Portland Fire and Rescue, but he actually has the knowledge from the organization that did Cahoots. And I first met Tremaine because he came into Street Roots because we had an unhoused frequent 911 caller, and he established a relationship with him because his emergency was houselessness, and he stayed with him. So it's kind of, to me, I'm looking at like, this is kind of a get to know you moment, right? Tremaine's going to be in your neighborhood a lot with his team.
And let me just say, big applause for that. Our new fire chief, Sarah Boone, is really committed to making sure that you see your neighborhood fire station as your fire station, as your community center, as your community space. So it's really important that you drop by the fire. If you have questions, quite frankly, drop by the fire station, right? Check in, right? Tremaine would love to see you, and the other firefighters would love to see you, right? If there are issues, come and talk to us so that we can actually troubleshoot them and fix them before they become big problems.
Question right there. We have time for just one more question, although I appreciate the willingness to stay longer. Childcare is about to release the little beast, and it's going to be intense. So, yeah, go ahead.
Speaking of costs, I know you're a fan of looking at city budgets, and I totally support this program. I think it's awesome. But how much is this pilot program going to cost? And then how much will it save on top of that? And then the third part is how much would it cost to implement citywide if it happened?
So the last question I can't answer yet because until we have data from the pilot, I would be premature to give you a number. Let me say the pilot will cost $500,000, which has already been allocated by Portland City Council last year. And we will use that money frugally, and we will attempt to find additional resources and maybe partner with some outside interests. I think the message I want to leave you with is that we are not trying to recreate the wheel. We're going to work with the county, with their mental health professionals. We're going to work with people who already provide the services. It'd be crazy for us to try to rebuild an entire program, but we can be the connector, and we can be the ones that keep people safe until we get them to the services that they need. Thank you all so much. I'm so excited you were here tonight.
There was just one clarifying point about the transport. The example you gave about the cab ride up, that's an alternative destination, alternative transport model that we've kind of played with in the past that we still use. So we will, if it's appropriate, if someone is in need of serious medical, we will still be able, through our infrastructure and radio, call an ambulance to get them to the hospital, or utilize our cab voucher system to get them where they're going until we can reevaluate the program for transport.
Thank you.
And thank you, Bob, for pitching in. And last but not least, could I introduce Matt McNally, who is my organizer. And I want to also introduce Kristen Johnson, who is my secret weapon in my office. She's my budgeted analyst. and she has over 11 years of city budget experience, so we go through the city budget with a fine-tooth comb. Last but not least, we have an evaluation form or information form we want to talk to you about. Here's Matt.
I just wanted to say really quick, we were passing out an evaluation form. This is our first time coming out to the community to present about street response after council passed the report. So you're going to be seeing a lot of us. We're going to be doing a ton of events over the next few months in Lents and keeping you updated. It'd be very helpful if you can let us know how this went, what kind of questions you still have. But there's also an opportunity to give us more input. Because this is a pilot that doesn't launch till the spring, and it's a flexible pilot, we'll continue to take community input throughout the entire process. So it's a very flexible design. So don't think that we're still not gathering input from the community if you feel like you have important contributions to make. So I'll stand by the door if anyone wants to drop these off with me. Thank you.
Thank you. And everyone, I can't emphasize this enough. We really want this conversation to continue. So please, if you haven't yet, leave us any questions that you have. We're going to type them up and pass them along to the commissioner or to Crossing Portland. We also live stream the event on Facebook, so you can go back and watch it. We're also going to post a video recording later. And let's keep this going. We're thrilled to hear that the commissioner wants to come back, and it sounds like we have lots of follow-up items. And we'll see you next month. Thank you.
So what do you do?